Mate, thanks for coming on the show. So, as you said, you're a bit of a self-confessed finance nerd. But, you know, what else do you do? Who is Adrian Stone?
Yeah, great question. Number one, I'm probably one of the oldest people you've had on the show. I'm 61, so it's time to switch off now.
Oh, well, yeah, no, that's interesting.
But
I don't know if we've had too many 60-year-olds. Definitely no 70-year-olds.
But I'm a boomer who believes in climate change, so I'm okay. Yeah. Okay, boomer. Yeah. I started off, with a business background, or that's not true. I started before then. I had an IT degree back in the 70s when we were using punch cards, which is really hilarious. But I really never programmed. I can, but I never did, so I kept away from the tech stuff.
Yep.
But I did join IBM more in sales and technical support, and had a really amazing, I'd say, 10 years there. But after the 6th year, I got this thing I call an entrepreneurial seizure. For some random, I have no idea what the tipping point was, but I just remember I had this sudden desire to get in my own business and be a startup founder, and you know how tough that can be.
Oh, it can be very tough.
And for the next 4 years, I just stressed out. IBM was the best company in the world to work for at that stage, like working for Google or Facebook today.
Yep.
And I went from really happy to like miserable, thinking, what could I do?
Yep.
And I'm really kind of risk averse. But I ended up leaving IBM to join IDB in Dad's business.
First steps that any entrepreneur should take.
Yeah, drop your Dad's business. But, for the first 2 years, we were lending money to panel beaters, fixing cars, body shops in America. Because they're real people. They're real entrepreneurs because they're out there fixing cars every day, trying to pay wages, and you have real conversations with them.
Yeah.
There's no corporate bullshit.
Real brick and mortar true businesses.
Yeah, and after 10 years working for IBM and coming from the university system was just such a relief to throw the suit away.
Yeah.
Just wear casual clothes like you're doing now.
Yeah, I'm probably overly casual, actually.
Well,
I've come straight off the beach. The sun's not even out.
Video can't see people over the counter. I am wearing long pants.
Adrian's nude from the bottom down, I'll tell you the truth.
So I wore casual clothes, went around speaking to panel beaters for the next 2 years. It was a complete mental reset. Then a couple of things happened. One, my father got very sick, and two, the business had some financial issues and pretty much went under. So I rebooted the business after a couple of years. So I was 32 to 33, something like that.
Yep.
And I'm starting from absolute scratch. And I rebooted the business. I went to a bank. They gave me a couple of $1 million unsecured. I have no idea why.
Wow. Geez, banks were generous back in the day, weren't they?
Yeah. And look, without that, I wouldn't have had my finance company up and going. But I kind of thought that business would always stay a small business because we need bank money and it's really hard to get. And I was probably right in hindsight. And I decided to start another business, a service business in the car accident space. We were basically doing motor claims for corporate fleets where their drivers are driving around, but they don't carry insurance because their balance sheet's bigger than AAMI's. And so we were sort of one of the first, certainly the first in Australia and one of the first in the world to actually create an internet-enabled system, a SaaS product eventually.
Yeah, right.
That. But we had no idea what SaaS was.
Yeah, that's right.
We were charging recurring revenue and we were taking commissions from the panel beaters. And
what year was this?
What am I talking about? 2000.
Oh, okay. So probably about the 7th SaaS business at this stage.
Yeah, and the first
worldwide.
First full complete iLogistics business, because I saw in a newspaper somebody was advertising it. They were the first, and we had a very similar system, and clearly we came before them. But I kind of realised that even that business, although it was growing gangbusters, Australia was just too small.
Yep.
And that's one of my bugbears about entrepreneurs and when investing in them is having a look at the guys or girls who are really looking at Australia as a starting point, or whether they're looking at Australia as the be-all and end-all.
Yep.
And I learned the hard way that even in my business, I could not possibly build a scalable business in Australia. So I explained it to my wife, and she quit a corporate job straight away. She understood, and we went to America and did a joint venture there because we didn't know anything about venture capital. I could probably raise VC. It was a SaaS business after all. But we went the joint venture route, so I found a corporate partner who took 49% of the business. We took 51%.
Perfect.
So that was in 2004. We grew that business, but I was, I'm very risk averse. So the minute I signed the contract, I looked for an acquirer.
Yep.
And 2 years later, I'd sold my businesses to an small English public company.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like a great result.
It was a great result for me because the money came in. I made sure it was an all-cash deal. I don't believe in shares and shares. I said to them, why should I swap risk in a company I know being mine for risk in a company I don't know being yours?
Yeah, I'll take the briefcase buyout. Thanks, guys.
And the CEO looked at me and said, good call. And so I exited just before the 2008 crash.
Yep. So what, 2006 this is? 2006,
Yeah,
2007?
mid-2006, we sold the business. You always stay on what's called an earn-out clause. They want to keep you doing the handover, keep you interested. But, here's another tip for anybody. If you're investing in a startup and the founder, or you get an exit, let's say you start your own startup and the corporate buys you, don't expect to ever last the 3-year earn-out, and don't ever expect to get a penny out of it because they'll manipulate it so that you won't. I walked out okay, but I stayed 1.5 years and came back to Australia.
I've got a buddy who just sold a coffee pod startup. And he was supposed to be running the show for X amount of time after the sale. And I just emailed with him, and he's going free diving, and he's on holidays for a little while. And I think it was just like, yeah, cool, done my part here, and then
Yeah, you don't want to be there, and actually they don't want you there.
yeah. Okay, cool. So what got you into obviously everyone has their reasons for going into entrepreneurship. They see a frustration and they okay, I can come up with an idea to fix this. They have, it's one of their values that they've brought up with through their family. Or what was it for you that grabbed you and just, forced you basically down the entrepreneurial path?
As I said, first thing was I had that seizure. I don't know why I had it.
Yeah.
I tried to be an entrepreneur. I don't remember having a huge entrepreneurial streak, surprisingly.
Especially being risk averse, like you say, self-confessed risk averse, chap.
But they say that the two most powerful forces in the universe are greed and risk, fear. And I have the fear rather than greed. So I'm no Gordon Gekko. But the funny thing is when you are an entrepreneur, you throw yourself into dangerous situations and then you say, oh, hey, shit, I'm in the middle of the water with sharks all around me. That's when your fear, or for me, that's when the fear thing kicks in. And then I have to paddle to shore again. Yeah. So that's why I'm probably succeed as an entrepreneur, because I throw myself in.
And then what? So shore is your exit?
Yeah.
Paddling to shore is your
exit? Paddling to shore is my exit.
Yeah.
So I'm again not one
of
those founders that thinks that you should build a business for life, because I just think that things change too often. Technology changes, time changes. I think a 5 to 10 year outlook for me is plenty. So I kind of I'm the type of founder that wants to build an exit. I don't necessarily invest in startups exactly the same as that. I'll invest in any type of founder, but for me, that's just a sensible outcome to aim for.
Yeah, right. So, and then did you grow up as you said, you're personal finance and finance itself is something that you're big on. Did you grow up just with being good at numbers, good at analysing, certain bits and pieces? What got you to that point?
Yeah, I was thinking about that walking on the way here for some reason. My two passions are personal finance, which is numbers, and investing in startups as a VC and independently, which is all about investing in future numbers. Yep. And I've come at all this with a complete non-financial background whatsoever. I was an IT guy. I could code, I could drink and have.
You could talk in ones and zeros, but you couldn't talk in 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s.
Perfectly said. Thank you. So I learned the hard way. I lost money. People stole money from me along the way.
Really?
I didn't know how to manage my businesses properly financially, and over time you learn.
I definitely agree with that. I've been quite entrepreneurial in my life. My first entrepreneurial job was. I grew up in St Andrews Beach on the Mornington Peninsula, and our 5-acre block of land backed onto the back of the Dunes golf course. So my first entrepreneurial venture was me and my best buddy would go over to the golf course and we would steal golf balls, and then we would wash them and sell them back to the golfers. So that bought me my first ever CD. That was my first ever entrepreneurial. We didn't really steal them. We kind of just found the ones that were off the beaten track. And then every now and again, we'd pinch a good one if we saw it. But,
you just reminded me of my first entrepreneurial venture. I was about... maybe I was 18, maybe I had a car, but I got this idea of putting security peepholes into people's front doors. You remember those things?
Yeah.
Now you have a ring on your doorbell, which is Wi-Fi, so you don't need the peephole anymore. But in those days you did. And I got this idea, I'm going to go around door to door installing peepholes in people's doors. How hard can it be?
Yeah.
So the worst entrepreneur in the world, first of all, I started with buying everything. So I ordered from somewhere, 200 peepholes. I bought a drill because I didn't have a drill. Yeah. I bought hole saws. I bought coveralls, and I got some sort of logo.
You embroidered. Yeah. You embroidered. You went all in.
And then I thought, I've got all the gear. I have to practice putting a peephole in. I'll go to my sister's place. So I went to my sister's place, said, I'll put a peephole into your door. And so the first thing was I drilled the hole from the outside in, and it just splintered everywhere. So I put a hole way too big for a peephole. So I bought another 200
It's a full look hole.
So I bought another 200 peepholes that were large on one side and small on the other. Went to her place and plugged it in, and it covered.
Yeah, covered your mistake.
Yeah, covered my mistake. Then I threw the drill away, the uniform away. I went to the market and sold all the peepholes I'd left at a loss.
Yeah.
And that was the end of it.
Yeah, no, well, I think we make, hopefully, I think the best entrepreneurs make mistakes, not once, they might make recurring mistakes, but in a business, and then they learn from that in their next business. You know, there's a lot of travel books up there, Lonely Planet Travel Guides. I had an adventure travel company for the fitness community. I founded it in 2013. I really think it was a new concept at the time. There was no one doing it. Now all your G Adventures and Intrepid, they all have wellness travel. And I really do think that we were one of the first. Adventure Fit it was called. And I tracked nothing. Financially, marketing spend, so on and so forth, ROI, whatever. And as I progressed, I started to understand, okay, cool, I'm flying blind here, I'm being an idiot, whatever. And I tried to learn on the fly, but I was so far, I'd fucked it by that stage. You know what I mean? And I'd also lost love for it and so forth. And it was great, the product was really good. So, and what ended up happening was I shut Adventure Fit down a year and a half ago. And my next company that I have now, which is a closed freelancer marketplace, it's like we know day to day every cent is accounted for. And I'm actually good with numbers now. And I can talk if I was on a Shark Tank pitch, I'd be able to answer all the questions,
Get Steve Baxter on the show and see if he'll test you on the spot.
Yeah. And that was just because I knew that had I known what I didn't know at the time, and had it been now, Adventure would have probably been a different story. But, I think that it's fair to make mistakes and, stuff up along the way, but you've got to evolve and you've got to learn from them. So after you had the exit in 2006 though, so that was like sounds like it was quite a success. Probably financially was quite good. And so what was next then?
I retired. So I was 40. I think I was 48 years old. We decided somewhere in that time to come back to Australia. We had a house. We ended up selling the house because we figured.
So you living in the US when you were doing this?
Yeah, we're living in Chicago.
Oh, right. Full on.
Yeah, so we weren't expecting to live there. We thought we'd go for 2 years. I wanted my company to be 100% run by Americans.
Yep.
But it was such a difficult joint venture, such a difficult relationship. After a year or two, we said, we're going to stay for the duration. And then, of course, suddenly we sold the business unexpectedly early. I know I was looking for the acquirer, but it happened very quickly. So we had to reverse all that, sell the house during the crash, and we came back. But yeah, I retired for a good 2 years, I'd say, either side of that. But, when you retire, I think even a long sabbatical, it becomes a struggle for relevance and meaning.
Yeah.
So if you're not if you like to play golf and that's your passion, then the relevance and meaning will be the competitions you have around golf and maybe beating your own, challenging yourself.
But even that can only go so far.
I don't know. I haven't tried that.
Yeah.
I like playing poker,
Yeah.
but I can't imagine myself going to Crown Casino every day and playing poker like some of the other old blokes I see there.
And there's not a whole lot of meaning in bettering your poker game. There's enjoyment, and there's, but I think meaning is very important.
Yeah, so I had, one of the things on my personal life checklist, which I created, and we can go back and talk about the personal finance side later. One of the things was I wanted to be a venture capitalist.
Yep.
I didn't know what being a venture capitalist actually meant. I didn't realize a VC meant investing other people's money.
Yeah.
What I really wanted to be was an angel investor, investing my own money.
Yep.
And I kind of figured that I had $500,000 in my budget for that, and I figured, well, if I invest in ordinary businesses, they each need a couple $100,000. It's like 1 or 2 or 3 businesses, and then I've done my dough, and that doesn't sound like fun to me. But I said there's these things called startups, and I asked around, and people said, oh, you get one of those off the ground for like $50,000. So I thought, well, if I invest in 10 startups, that's $500,000. I can have more fun and maybe more chance of getting a winner.
Yeah.
So that was my thinking at the time, and I met up with a couple of people in the space, one including Nathan Sampamon, who is founder of Inspire 9. Melbourne's probably first and best tech co-working space.
Oh, I've been to Inspire 9.
Yeah.
I had a meeting there once. It's in Footscray or something, isn't
Yeah,
it?
no, well, it was one in Footscray, but the first one was in Richmond.
Yeah, I've been to the Footscray one, yeah.
Yeah, and so Nathan and I got chatting, and we thought, well, hang on, there's these things called like Y Combinator, these things like called accelerators around the world. Why don't we set up one of those? And I thought, that's great. Not only do I not have to spend my own money, but I can spend other people's money investing in more startups.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we did. So in 2011, Nathan and I started Melbourne's first venture accelerator called Angel Cube, which ran out of Inspire 9 because you need a space. And we invested in 4 tech startups in the first year just to test the concept. And then between 5 and 10 for the next 5 years. So we ended up with a portfolio of about 30 startups, including LifeX, who were a big Kickstarter project and do the Wi-Fi light bulbs.
Yep, gotcha.
Tableau, a fantastic book publishing platform. So when you do your book, that's where you'll go. And a whole bunch of others.
Yeah, cool.
But along the way, I also started angel investing, which is the difference. VC investing other people's money.
Yep.
I started angel investing my own money as well. So I've invested in about another 30 startups. And I try not to overlap the two pools very much. So, yeah.
So your strategy when investing as a VC compared to your strategy as you know looking after yourself as an angel investor, how does it differ, if at all?
Yeah, no, it's 100% different. Well, one, the model is different anyway because the venture accelerator invests a very small amount of money into a cohort, which means 5 or 10 at the same time.
Yep.
And you take them through a 3-month process.
Yep.
So so it's a bit more of a batch. It's like, I shouldn't say
Not all
batch.
with VCs though, right?
No,
Not all
no.
VCs is an accelerator. Yeah.
No, that's very unusual.
Yeah.
But
in this case.
Yeah, in this case. Normal VCs just do the same thing. They just, look at deal flows that comes and invest as it comes. But you're right, when you're investing other people's money, even at that very early stage, there's a lot of, not a lot of responsibility and duty, fiduciary duty, legal duty, but also moral duty.
Yeah.
Looking after other people's money. I used to say when I'm investing my own money, that I invest in any startup as long as it's breathing, and if it's not breathing, I push it, then invest in it. So my own personal strategy is much more founder-based, very loose, very relaxed, very
going with your gut a lot more, I would assume.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. So I remember I had a look at some of your writings on Medium, and I noticed that you've got 60 startups in your at one point you'd had 60 startups in your portfolio. So is that still the case?
Yeah,
something like that.
About half direct, half through the fund.
Okay, cool. So if and that must be over the last 8 to 10
years.
Years.
Yeah.
So how many startups? This is kind of off topic a little bit, but I just wanted to know how many startups have you invested in, and how many startups do you still have in your portfolio?
Okay,
so to speak.
It's very hard to know when the startup isn't in your portfolio because they have to actually go belly up and liquidate the company and do all those things. And not all startups do that. So I haven't had many liquidations.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So technically the rest, therefore, are still in my portfolio.
Oh, really?
But then there's breathing or not breathing.
Yeah, yeah.
You're in ICU.
They're just hiding. They're hiding.
You're either... exactly. They could be on holidays, they could be hiding, or they could be in hospital. We don't know.
Yeah.
So I just know the ones that are really active that I talk to a lot. And again, because I consider myself founder friendly, I don't push myself on founders. If they reach out to me, I'll communicate with them, talk to them, help them out. So that's a handful.
Yeah,
Small
okay.
handful.
All right, cool. So you've obviously had some good wins then. So in the portfolio that you've got, can you give us some examples of some really good wins? And I don't mean like huge exit or just like a concept that you've really loved, something that's changed an industry, like something that's emotionally like a real win for you. And maybe like if there's any that if you got any horror stories, they're always good too.
Well, you have a lot of horror stories. Let me start off with the very first one. It's kind of funny. So this was our very first year of Angel Cube, 2011. We're trying to build a community up by its bootstraps.
Yep.
Through the co-working space, through the fund. It was very high profile. So AFR, the Fin Review, put out a full page on us with photos straight away. BRW was a magazine. Gave us a full page. It was unbelievable how much PR we got without trying. We didn't try any PR. It just came. So this was a big... People were watching this. And so we took on 4 startups and we wanted to generate at least some successes. And 6 weeks into the program, and we pay them up front. It was only $20,000 in those days, but still.
Yep.
And 4 weeks or 6 weeks after we started, one of the founders gone. Didn't see him again, never heard of that person again.
What?
Gone.
An absconsion.
Not bad. Not bad.
He's straight to Mexico.
$20,000 for 6 weeks' work is not bad if you can get it. You know?
I'd take it.
I probably should invest in him again. A smart founder. So that's probably an example of like a real failure.
And what do you think happened there?
I think he went surfing.
Full on.
Yeah.
He just said, "Oh, you know what? This is I'm not willing to follow through with this. I'm off, and I'll take the cash."
I have no idea. Gone. Never heard. Never. And this person was actually a pillar of the startup community before that.
Yeah,
like they're
right.
almost a public figure in the space. No one's heard of this.
Drop their
person
name
since.
if you like.
No, I'm not dropping the name. In fact, I can't remember the name to tell the truth. But I spoke to Dave McClure from 500 Startups in San Francisco. He's probably one of the really early American accelerators. I think they've invested in like 2,000 startups. Puts us to shame. Anyway, I was chatting to him, and he opened my eyes to philosophy. He said, "Look, when you write this many checks, we don't care if somebody runs off with the money.
Yeah.
There's going to be failures of any sort.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
One of them happens to be theft.
Exactly. One of them happens to be theft.
Yeah.
And that's very philosophical. So with our numbers that we gave to our investors, we said we would invest in like 40 startups. We ended up doing 30 just because of time reasons.
Yep.
But we'd invest in 40 startups and we expect 4 to exit.
Yep.
If we knew which 4, we wouldn't invest in the other 36.
Yeah, of course.
So clearly we expect to tear up 36 checks.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter how we tear it up.
Yep.
Tear it up.
Yep. Fair enough. So when you're looking for an investment, or a founder, I guess, it depends on, but when you're looking for an investment as a VC, what are you really looking for? Because a lot of the listeners of this show, they won't really understand the VC. I understand it a little bit. Even talking the word SaaS, people will be, at the start of the show, people will be going, what the fuck is SaaS? You know, and for the people that don't know, it's software as a service. But like when we're talking VC, that world, and you're looking for an investment, what are some of the things that you're looking for?
Okay, so the first thing to realise, as we said before, a VC or venture capitalist, some call them vulture capitalists. And
Vampire capitalists.
Well, there's a lot of backlash on VCs at the moment. So the idea is for people watching or listening, that a venture capitalist, again, has that what we call a power law theory, that like you do a startup, you expect 100% success rate because otherwise you're dead, you're finished, you failed. So it's a 0-1 outcome pretty much. Yeah. You either failed or not. But on the other hand, if you reach break even, you might just sit on that break even point. That means that you got as much money coming in the door as expenses, and with a software business maybe doesn't take so long. It may be that you can make enough money for yourself to live on. Yeah. And think about whether you're going to keep it, grow it, sell it, whatever, over time. But as soon as you take venture capital money in the door, they take a board seat. They have a say in your company. They won't do it without a say in your company, as you would expect. They want you to go big or go home. Yeah. So now what it's like is instead of investing, instead of backing a baseball player, could be second baseman or third baseman, or BBL, there you go, perfect example. Instead of looking at someone who might be playing test cricket, venture capitalists are investing in 2020. Yeah. You got to go up there and bash the shit out of the ball. Yeah. And you're either going to go huge or you're going to get out. And they don't care because they're making 10 investments, like 10 batsmen. This analogy is going really well.
Yeah, no, it is a great analogy. Someone's going to hit 80 off 30 balls.
Exactly. But then it's probably not going to be you, and they've just pushed you into a binary outcome. Yep. You no longer have the option to sit back and just reach break even and just see what happens. You're either in or you're out. Yep. Yeah,
that's interesting because I had a, through StartMate, who I know you're a part of, I had a meeting with Paul Naftali recently. And because it was like, I wasn't applying for the cohort or anything like that. It was it was actually through the Commons. So it was like, it was basically some advice over 30 minutes, and then if you showed promise, maybe you talk about the cohort and whatever. And then I remember Paul asking me at the start of the call, he was like, so what are we talking about here? He was lovely. I like this bloke. He was great to chat to. But he said to me at the very start of the call, he said, so what are we talking about here? Are we talking win at all costs or what? And I was I gave him an answer that was more along the lines of, well, And then as soon as I said that, I thought, fuck, this bloke's not even going to pay attention now.
No, he's
you
done.
know what I mean?
You lost him.
Yeah, because you were supposed to get a second, because I know heaps of the StartMate crew, and I was really wanting to get a second interview, like you get a second one if you show potential or whatever. And then as soon as I said that, I was like, fuck. But I was just being honest, But yeah, it's win or go home. So
rule one, never be honest.
yeah.
That's a joke.
I live my life like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, right, cool. So you have to have ambition is obviously number one. The founders have to be like, all right, cool, we're going to take over the world, and you guys can give us some money and come along for the ride. That's kind of like what you want to see from a founder, I guess.
And what we're seeing in San Francisco, for example, is a bubble. And if you read the TechCrunch and all the newspapers, you think that's truth. But right now, the venture capital money is chasing the startups. Whereas in the rest of the world, particularly Australia, the startups are chasing the money, as you would kind of logically expect. So, there's too many startups chasing too few VCs, even though a lot of money has come into the scene via the superannuation funds recently. So when you go and approach a VC, number one, VCs don't operate all at the same level. I'm talking about financially. So they tend to be strated almost like a building. And like an accelerator like we were running, I would call basement level. Like you're not really a full startup yet. You're taking $20,000. Ground level for a startup is maybe when you've taken a little bit of friends and family money, 50 grand, maybe you've got an angel investor or a rich uncle or auntie who's put in maybe another 50 or 100 grand. So you might have, 50,000 or 100,000 and you're building your startup and traveling on the way. Then you probably go through first floor and second floor, which might be angel rounds, where you're going to people like me and raising maybe $250,000, but it might be from 4, 5, 6 or more individual angels. And the type of documentation you use is very light. It could be either a convertible note or it can be a share agreement to sell, but it doesn't really matter at that stage. And that's when, if you get through those stages and you're now maybe turning over $1 million a year, real revenue, not fake market revenue, but not like for your travel business, not bookings going through your platform, but actually commission you're getting, which is your real revenue. When you get to about $1 million there, you might start knocking on the door of the Paul Naftali's of this world, looking to raise, $500,000, $1 million round.
And that would be technically like the next round would be what they would call like a Series A, Series B, Series C. Would that be right? Yeah,
probably a seed round would be an angel round, seed round in Australia, probably the same. You're right. So in Australia, maybe it could be a Series A or a large seed or the numbers get very murky.
All right. So let's use, because again, I understand somewhat of this, but I like to think how my listeners would be thinking. And I know my listeners would be thinking, what do people actually invest? So let's use, maybe, could you give us a bit of an idea if you know the numbers? Do you know the numbers of Canva, for example? Everyone knows Canva?
Yeah, I don't know the numbers.
Well, can you give us an example of like a typical, pretty successful raise? Like what would a Series A, what would a seed round be? What would a Series A, Series B, Series C? A really successful, just to put it into perspective for people.
Numbers obviously, are all over the place, but just notionally, I would say that again, an advisory round or an accelerator round or a friends, family, fools round, as we call it, would be about $50,000. An advisory round when you get maybe one angel investor who's going to give you some advice and just underpin that first bit. The next round, probably $250,000 to $500,000 would be an angel round. I call that a seed round, probably. A small seed round these days, maybe. The next round would be a large seed round or even an A round would be probably $1 million. A B, $2, $3, $5 million. And then you're probably talking about Australian Stock Exchange type raising.
Yeah, cool. All right. So, and then as a VC as well, so you're looking at, ambition from the founder, you're looking at the founder themselves. What type of companies are you going for? Like what type of business models, what type of industries, what really lights the eyes of an investor? Well,
this is really topical because right now, especially in the USA, but also here, you're hearing about a lot of direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands. So e-commerce is coming into a reawakening. But the type is, where you might put a mattress into a box, slap and
Casper koala style.
Find one from China, slap your own name on the side, and just sell online. So those direct-to-consumer businesses have shown a bit of a flaw in the venture capital model because venture capitalists typically invest in software, because they're high-margin businesses. You need a few smart, girls in a room, guys in a room, doing some coding, and you can turn out a product that you can sell for $50,000, $150,000 a month, and you don't need to do much of that to make a lot of profit. So VCs love those types of businesses. They seem to like it even more if they're recurring revenue, which is why this software as a service thing, it just means that you're giving your client, be a business or a person, access to your software, and they punch your credit card once a month.
Yeah.
That's what a SaaS business is.
Yeah. Canva is another really good example of that.
Yeah, so Canva has got some recurring revenue, and they've got some transactional revenue, but mainly recurring, and they're growing like gangbusters, and that's what VCs are really looking for, high growth. So software businesses really give you that. So going back to what they don't invest in, or do invest in but shouldn't, that might show the line, is when you are doing a mattress business and putting a mattress into a box, you suddenly not just got a bunch of smart people in a room, but you got stock as well.
Yeah, logistics and stock.
Yeah,
and
so
lots
you
of
have
other
a thing called
COGS.
exactly COGS. So you've got a gross margin that has just dropped from 80% to 50% to maybe 60% if you're doing really well.
Yep.
So you just lost 20 points, 1/5 of your potential profit margin. In fact, you probably lost your whole profit margin. And so venture capitalists just started to realize that those businesses just don't scale the same way as a software business. And they've been valuing them like software because they're e-commerce. Well, but
they're technically online, so their value is much lower.
Yeah, they're really traditional businesses dressed online. So I think venture capitalists now are starting to make distinguish between businesses that are software businesses or technology business, can be hardware as well, versus businesses that are enabled by technology. Every business nowadays is enabled by technology.
That's
At
right.
Shopify, you're an e-commerce business.
Yep.
So there's no reason why venture capitalists should pay you huge multiples.
Yeah, you can be a bricklayer that brings in all of his business through Facebook ads, and you're not exactly a software business. You're not going to have that same multiplier.
But if you're if you're a bricklayer who buys a brick printing machine, then you're just a better, more profitable business, but you still haven't got scalability, so you're still not investable. But if you're a bricklayer who invents a 3D brick printing machine, is first to take it to market, and can show some signs that people want it,
you're going to have 75,000 VCs
chasing your door, throwing the money at you.
To anyone listening, there's a business idea for you if you're not already onto it. 3D brick printing. It's free advice from Adrian Stone here. But so if you were, say, a brick and mortar business, or you were a service-based business or an e-com business, that's where you would go and have more luck, I guess, with an angel investor, someone who has less appetite for risk, doesn't have as big of a funds to call upon, and is happy to play the longer, slower game and be more hands-on and involved. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, and again, it probably depends. Like the ideal angel investor is somebody who's got some domain experience. So again, if you're looking for somebody to fund your brick printing machine, because there's capital costs and really is it going to grow that big? If you've got somebody from that industry, like who was a bricklayer themselves, but have a lot of money, they're going to be passionate about it. And more like to invest. Yeah,
cool. So, talking about VC and really, like, for example, I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about Tesla, for one. Tesla's stock price over the last since 2020, basically, and since they've been releasing their numbers, and but basically the move towards lots of venture capital money going to clean industry and so forth. So can you talk to me about that? I mean, I know StartMate just ran a climate cohort, and I want to learn more, and I want to actually, I'm hoping that you give me the answer that I'm looking for here. But like, is clean industry and I guess the climate industry, is that basically a real rush for VCs and for startup founders and so forth?
It's definitely a rush for startup founders because they're motivated by social need and things other than money. It's a rush for VCs, most VCs, because it's a potential gold rush, not because it's necessarily climate changing. I mean, whether a VC,
no, that's right.
Whether an individual VC or partner at a firm has those thoughts, and they probably do because they're probably younger and they're more likely to have those thoughts. They can't direct their fund to invest anywhere other than where they're going to get the best return using a model. So unless that VC's been set up specifically to do social impact, and there are some, and more growing all the time. So just like they're triple net bottom line companies, they're triple bottom line venture capital firms, and it seems that the numbers coming out of those firms is that you're actually not penalised by investing in things that have social impact or environmental impact.
Yep.
And in some cases, you actually improve the financial outcomes,
Yep.
which is great.
Yep. I remember I met a gentleman named Will Richardson, I think, from StartMate. And what's his investment firm called? They're social impact investment, really?
That's the Giant Leap,
Giant Leap
Fund,
yeah, that's
who are
right.
doing really amazing things. And again, the perfect example, like I've seen some of the startups they've invested in, and they're great startups, whether they have that impact angle or not.
Mm-hmm.
So Will's doing, and the team are doing amazing things like Rachel Yang around basically supporting Australian startups in this space, and B, proving that the outcomes are as good if not better.
That's very it's positive. It's really, really great. So talking about going back from where we're at now and talking about you personally and basically your financial nerd background. So I read when I was doing a little bit of prep for this show that you've heavily invested in real estate as well. Is that correct? So, and you also mentioned I remember earlier you said that there was a checklist of like financial goals that you might have had. I mean, those 2 points, I want to roll them into a question and just say, what is your actual investment philosophy for yourself? I'd love to know.
Okay. So first of all, I started quite late.
Yep.
So I missed all the opportunity to do good financial planning and all that sort of stuff in my 20s and even in my 30s.
Yep.
So when I left IBM, for example, after 10 years, so here's a corporate career, my first job, I'm earning top dollar, and I literally walked out of there with zero savings.
There's a lot of people listening to this going, I've still got a chance.
And, well, I'd spent most of my long distance relationship. That did a lot. So there's always a girl. But I mean, in my 20s, I bought a piece of investment property only because a friend from IBM told me about it. There were two going at the same time. It was a mortgagee sale, so I clicked in on it. Sounds like a bargain. And we bought 2 apartments at Flickton 2 years later and made some money. I bought a old Porsche, a 10-year-old Porsche. It wasn't that much more expensive than buying a new car, but even at that age, buying a new car is dumb financially. But I actually made more money when I sold that than when I sold the apartment.
Oh, man. I was really surprised when you said when your second investment you're talking about was buying a car. So how did you do that, though? Did you fix it up or
fluke? Yes, sorry, we did. We changed the colour of the car from lime green to red.
Oh, that would have made... There's an instant 20%.
But my friend and I did it in his backyard together. He and I.
Well, there's you've just lost 20%.
Yeah, we did the interior of the doors in spray cans.
Right.
So there's the minus 20%. So that was just lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, that car would be an amazing investment now. Those are going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. They would have probably, re-scraped and turned it back to lime green.
Yeah.
But so I really came with no financial knowledge, and my wife was pretty much a breadwinner. She was working in IT. She'd left the teaching industry and got a second degree in computer science as well. And so as I was going to my dad's business, we met, and she was joining Telstra as a professional hire.
Yep.
And she was a breadwinner pretty much because I only took $30,000 a year in dad's business and my business. And I never increased that past $50,000 until we moved to America. So that was from 30 to 40, about 15 years of paying myself virtually nothing in my own business.
Wow.
But it's what you have to do. But in 1998, I read a book called The E-Myth.
I love that book.
It's amazing. Best book.
Yeah.
But like most books, it tells you what to do, doesn't tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
And I eventually joined their consulting program, which is ridiculously expensive for like 2 hours on the phone with some person a month who probably read the book a week before me. But having
Is this through the E-Myth?
Yeah.
Oh, they were selling. So that book was kind of like a
lead gen.
Really, was it? I had no idea. That's
Brilliant.
such a great lead generation asset. It's one of the best books, business, books I've ever written.
That program, the consulting program, which helped me think through and forced me to think through every aspect of my business, changed my business completely, systemized. That made me change the IT, and that was the other story.
Awesome.
But the other thing it did was it said, look, you're not in business. That's not your life. The whole job of your business, except for a very few founders whose whole passion is to is around their start, is to change the world.
Elon Musk, for example.
Yeah, perfect example. Okay, he'll throw all his money to do that. But 99% of people are trying to do that, but also to make a living and get a payday one day.
Yeah.
And I had no thoughts around that. My business was breaking even. I had no money in the bank. My wife was working. We had 2 children.
This is the business that you eventually exited.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is 98, so it's 6 years before we went to America.
Yep.
I had no thoughts about going to America.
Yep.
And I read the book, and the very first thing in the book, it said, listen, buddy, work out what you want to do with your life and whether you want to be working or not. And when I sat down and did a life plan, I realised I didn't want to be running this business for the rest of my life. I wanted to travel a bit. I wanted to invest in startups. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to do various... Actually, I didn't want to write a book. I wanted to do public speaking.
Yep.
I love getting up and speaking to people, so that's what I wanted to do. And I realised all of that required time. And you don't get time while you're running a business. So I knew I would have to sell the business and fund that lifestyle. And that's when my personal finance journey began.
Right.
Because I worked out that I needed to sell my business for a very large number, and hence the idea of going overseas. And the reason why was I needed enough money in the bank to fund what I thought then would be a $250,000 a year lifestyle, which sounds like a lot if you're earning 50 or 100K.
Especially when you're doing those figures at in 1998 also.
$998.
You're really you're living on a yacht.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, I wanted to travel, and so that's business class flights,
Yep.
2 or 3 times a year, right? That's
Yep.
what it is.
Yep.
That's the type of life I wanted to put my kids through private school. Just that was the way it was.
Yep.
I wanted not necessarily have a holiday home, but I wanted to have a couple of nice cars.
Yep.
It's the way it is. And I wanted the freedom to do all that without earning money. And and I wanted to be able to invest in startups, and that was a number I came up with.
Yep.
And starting from zero. So that number had to come from, well, you multiply that by 20, that's my rule of thumb, which simulates a 5% return.
Can you say that again? So
Okay, so I worked out I needed $250,000 a year. For
Yep.
you, it might be 50,000 or 100 or 150,000,
Yep.
no matter
Yep.
what that number is. That's your personal number that you just got to come up with for yourself,
you multiply it by 20 for you
which
mean
simulates a 5% return.
Yes. Okay. Cool.
Which means I need to have about $5 million sitting in assets, passive assets. And as I said, I was starting with zero. So I still had my business. It was still a small business. Didn't have thoughts of going to America at that stage. But what I did do is I bought my first piece of commercial real estate. So remember, I hadn't bought any investment real estate since I was working for IBM 20 years before that. We'd bought our own house and we're busy paying off a mortgage and a little renovation like every other couple does. My wife was working. And what I did was I used my cash flow from the business to actually buy an office for the business. So I bought a piece of real estate just over $1.25 million using zero down payment and zero of my own money in the bank.
The old 105% mortgage.
Yeah, well, I
105% loan.
stretched the payments from my customers and my suppliers out enough to give me a buffer of cash in the bank, and that became my deposit. Because as you stretch out payment times, more cash comes in from your client than you're paying out. So you build up a little bit of a cash buffer, which you have to pay back eventually.
Yep.
So that paid the deposit, and then the profits of the business, I kept a real tight control of expenses for the next year, didn't add staff as quickly as I needed to, held back on doing a few things I wanted to, but that paid the mortgage. And then a year later, the business had grown sufficiently that I managed to fix up my timetable paying suppliers, and I managed to keep up with the mortgage payments without stretching the business.
Fixed up your timetable paying supplies.
So that was my first foray into real estate.
And what age were you then?
30, late 30s.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, cool. My dad's favourite book is Rich Dad Poor Dad. So he has invested in a decent amount of real estate. Had some good wins and some could have beens and so on and so forth. And he really drilled into me to buy real estate when I was really young. I bought my first house when I was 19 actually, and then had I bought my third place. I don't know whether I had 3 at any time, but I bought my third place by the time I was like 22, 23. And I basically funded my travelling all around the world throughout my 20s with the equity. Yeah. Like I would come back from a trip. I spent about 18 months travelling. I'd come back from a trip, refinance, do a renovation, do whatever I needed to do, and then I'd go away again.
You flip it to make enough money to go away again.
Yeah, pretty much. And I've been to nearly 50 countries, and I wouldn't change a thing. I don't have any real estate anymore. I started my business, and then the idea was to have one property at all times and then start the business. And then all my money went into the business. But so going back to the philosophy thing. So if you were so obviously you had your exit, you started investing in real estate and so forth. But if you were starting out again, or if you were to give advice to somebody that's listening that's, in their 30s, when people are really starting to think about, okay, cool, I want to set myself up so I can live comfortably. I really love what you said about, lifestyle stuff, because I think we work way too much as a society, as a culture. It's really dumb. But if you were to give someone some advice, like where would you start if you did it all again?
Well, so the bit I was missing, obviously, was to save 10% of your pay packet in the bank and all the stuff that books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad would
Richest
give you.
Man in Babylon.
And Richest Man, well, those are the first 2 books I read in 1998.
Yeah. Richest Man in Babylon's sick. I love that book.
It's
I've read
great
Rich
book.
Dad, Poor Dad too. But.
So those are the first 2 personal finance books I read. And I'm in my late 30s and thinking, what the fuck have I missed out on? It opened my eyes. So I'm on this parallel journey, 1, to grow my business in a way so I could get to this large number.
Yep.
But 2 is I may not ever sell the business. So I've got to invest as much money as I can along the way. So I actually made my first money out of investing, earning $50K a year from my own business. It's not like the business was generating millions. That wasn't until years later.
Yeah, you didn't need a heap to start.
Yeah, so the first thing I did was I started reading every single personal finance book that I could get my hands on. And I still do today. You'd be surprised. I still buy personal finance books, mainly just to read them and say, that's bullshit. But to do that. So my first thinking, so I missed out on the things like, saving 10 or 15% of your income and all those things those books will tell you. But my two number one rules.
Number one and number 1A.
Yeah, 1A, 1B. First of all, earn more than you spend.
Yep.
And that's very powerful because most books you read will say live within your means. I say make your means as large as possible and then don't spend it.
Yep.
Because that difference, if you just focus on money saving and cutting out the lattes and doing all that sort of stuff, you're going to focus on thinking small. You try to save a coffee here, a coffee there, and your life is really shit in doing that. So what's the point? I say rather lift the lid on what you're earning. So if you've got a job, then start a side hustle. Open up an eBay store or do a little Shopify store on the side, or write some. If you're a coder, write a bit of code.
I had a bloke on last week who was his specialty was dark net drug dealing, actually. So another side hustle option.
Look, if it's got the good stuff, just give me my number. But other than that,
sorry.
So start a side hustle within your legalities and morals, and save all of that money, as well as saving some of your own, or save as much of that money as you can. That's my number 1 rule. And my number 2 rule, my 1B rule, is delayed gratification. So don't just get something today because you want it. And I've got some rules of thumb around that. But let's say your rich auntie dies and leaves you some money. Spend 10% of it because you deserve to spend some money, and lock the rest away, never to be seen again. It's towards your nest egg, your retirement. So delaying gratification, not buying something the second that you see it, will get rid of most of your overspending issues.
Delayed gratification. So, for example, if someone doesn't get a lump sum, if someone's just, if they're saving some of their day-to-day, their living expenses is going, they're siphoning some off and it's going to their savings and so on and so forth. So can you give us an example of like how you would use that rule in a day-to-day sense? Yeah,
just you walk into a shop and you see a leather jacket and it's only $800 and it's a bargain, right, for a leather jacket these days. And you say, I really want that leather jacket. Ask them to put it aside for you for 48 hours. And just go home and then just decide if you really want that leather jacket.
Yeah.
And the chances are once you think it through, you'll probably decide you don't really need that leather jacket. Maybe you'll put it off and buy it something like that in 2 months' time, and by then you'll have forgotten all about it.
Yeah, so it's really the sleep on it rule.
Yeah, and the bigger the purchase, obviously, the longer you need to sleep on it. Like if you think about buying a new car, don't.
Yeah, sleep on it forever.
And sleep on and if you're not going to do that, at least sleep on it for a year, that type of thing. And that will see you 90% of the way to stage 1 of personal finance.
Well, I think the real disappointing fact for me of this whole situation of managing personal finance is we have too many bright, flashy objects, Like you walk down the street, we're in the city now, you walk down the street or get on one of the freeways or whatever, and all you see is hundreds of billboards. Buy this ridiculous shit you don't need. Buy the, sign up to this program that you probably don't want. Like you get pulled in so many directions, and the whole consumerism thing is pretty tough to beat. I actually I saw the Netflix documentary Minimalism. recently, and it really changed. By recently, it was probably like 3 or 4 years ago, because I used to buy lots of different things. I'd go into JB Hi-Fi to buy some new earphones because I love listening to podcasts and audiobooks, and I'd walk out with a new TV and a set of earphones, because I wanted extra 3 inches. So I've always been good at earning money, but bad at managing it. I'm getting better at managing it now. I really think I am, but I would always get sucked into that, buying shit that we don't need. And it's so sad because people work so hard. Really, they work so hard to make ends meet. But if you actually looked at how much stuff you don't need, it's that real pleasure-driven stuff.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to give me dopamine right now. Like, I'm going to feel really fucking awesome about this purchase for the next 24, 48 hours. And then I don't give a shit about it for the next, the rest of my life. So it's hard to, I think it's hard to break through that for a lot of people because, we're just so trained to buy useless shit all the time.
And look, I've got the bad habits back pretty much because, for me to buy, a pair of headphones is probably not going to change my life anymore.
Yeah.
But during that period, I was very disciplined about that, delaying. Now my wife says I like to buy things, I just don't like to own them.
Yeah, that's cool. I actually have just been rereading. Have you read Barefoot Investor?
Yes.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I actually did like it. It's one of the few that didn't suck completely.
Yeah. So, do you know, fun fact, that's the most successful book in Australian history.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
More than the Bible?
Oh, maybe not more than the Bible. Not written by an Australian, though.
Okay.
Let's say written by an Australian. I actually first time I listened to it, I listened to it on audiobook, and I listened to lots and lots of audiobooks, and I always read a couple of reviews and look at the ratings, and that's the highest rated book I've ever seen on Audible. I've never seen anything above 4.7, maybe 4.75. I reckon Sapiens is right up there. Sapiens is a really high rating. That's 4.9. It's just, people love it. But I set up the barefoot buckets recently, and it's really working wonders for me because with certain banks you can have it all siphon off automatically.
Yeah.
So automated transfers. So my buckets are splurge, and I don't really ever spend the splurge. Need more than what I have in the splurge. So going out have a couple of beers with my mates. This afternoon I'm going climbing 1 block that way at the indoor climbing bouldering centre, and it's 10% is for splurge, and it really works wonders. Smile is next, fire extinguisher, and then the rest is your expenses. But I think having control and actually seeing your finances like that is really powerful. So for me, I always had the ability to earn money. I've always been good with earning money, bringing in large sums of money. Since I was 19, because I bought real estate, I have always dealt in like tens, 20s, 50s, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
Especially when I was younger, when my mates were worrying about 50, 100, 200 bucks, And I've always been good at making money, but never been good at managing it. So when you said that you'd read those 2 books that changed your mindset around, what you wanted to do investment-wise and stuff when you were 38, I kind of feel like I'm going through the same thing I'm 34 now. At probably 32, I started going through the same thing. All right, cool. I know how to make money. It's always been something that's come easy to me, but I'm terrible at managing it. Do I always want to be on the hamster wheel and stuck? So I feel like I'm going around in circles with my tangents here. But okay, cool. So one question I did want to ask you, which was around the books, and before I get off talking about Barefoot Investor, is what are some of the books that for you really changed your perceptions on a certain thing, like when you're talking about personal finance, investment in general, or just business in general, life in general? But what are some of those books that were real key moves for you?
The number one book was clearly the E-Myth.
Yep.
On both the business and personal finance side.
Yep.
Well, it ignited the personal finance, passion. So that was a tiny little spark. But in terms of the business side, it was completely revolutionary.
Yep.
It set the whole base for the business for me to be able to do what came afterwards. So that was clear. Oh, absolutely, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the number one thing I learned from that was that an asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. So then you question, what is your house? Because you're living in the house, is it putting money in your pocket? So is it really an asset or a liability? And by the way, I suggest that people do buy a house because we're just not disciplined savers. So what the house will do for you is it forces you to build up whatever the house value is over 30 years. Whether you keep living in it or you're paying rent somewhere else, but at least it forces you to have an asset. Yeah, those books and Richest Man in Babylon was crazy good at that time.
Yeah, Richest Man in Babylon is really good because it's very palatable for a finance book. I think it's a really good starting point because it's just a really nice. It's a narrative to a degree, and it's a very nice and short and sharp, easy read. I found.
Yeah.
So I reckon for people looking for personal finance books, that's probably a good place to start. So, and what about? I saw a quote from Warren Buffett when I was looking through your bio. It was in one of your bits and pieces we gathered when we were looking for when I was doing the prep for the show. So what about like investing in mutual funds and so forth, or shares and the like? So obviously there's the VC and angel investing that you've done, and you've obviously talked about real estate. But what are your thoughts on shares and funds and so forth, and also in comparison to real estate? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, there's two aspects of that. One is investing, and one in order to grow your wealth, and the other one is investing in order to maintain your wealth. Mm-hmm. So my investing philosophy obviously has changed dramatically before my exit, when I was trying to build wealth, to after my exit when I'm trying to protect wealth.
Yep.
So let's just talk about while we're trying to build wealth.
Yep.
The key time. I think that's when you've got to take a lot of risks. Mm-hmm. So investing in mutual funds and keeping the money in there for a long time guarantees you, I think I've done the numbers, basically in the US, I think it's 9.5%. In Australia, it's about 8%, something like that. Guarantees you. That's not going to make you wealthy, right? An 8% return, you have to save half your pay packet for 40 years in order to beat inflation and be able to retire.
Yeah, that's right. Inflation's a killer.
So that's not, 40 years does not sound like, getting rich to me. So I think that you need to take a few more chances. So, if you've got domain experience or if you know something about where technology is going, then I think you can afford to take a gamble and maybe, put 10% of your money into like Tesla stocks or, some, the only stocks I'm invested in now in the risk part of my portfolio are marijuana stocks.
Yep.
Because I just believe in the long-term view of marijuana. Not that I'm a partaker, but I understand the industry. Baby formula stocks I was in because of China. I've just sold out of those, and China's pretty much closed the gate. So
what do you mean by that? Out of the China, can you elaborate?
So in China, there was a big case about, I can't remember how long ago, it was 10, 15 years ago, but they're putting paint thinners in baby formula for babies.
Yep.
So there's been a big flood of Chinese money going into Australian dairy companies to produce baby formula for the China market.
Gotcha.
And it was less regulated now. There's been a lot of money made on the way. And I invested in a couple of, startups I saw and on the stock market and made a decent return. And China's just put more roadblocks in the way now. So that's sort of dropped away. But anyway, so that's my risky part of my portfolio. I don't invest at all in mutual funds at all. Real estate, I feel like, well, you've got the evidence. I mean, you can go put, I don't know how much money you're putting down on the property.
Oh, I'll tell you, fuck all.
Yeah.
As a 20-year-old, 19-year-old kid, through the Australian and Victorian, governments, they gave I can't remember what it was, but it was like 18,000. My dad gave me $15,000 from a $1,000 block that was on a title that he bought years earlier, me and my brother. Lent me $15,000 and I saved about bloody $7,000 of my own money. So $7,000 I was able to leverage into a $200,000 property, which, in Frankston, it was it was an investment in Frankston, and Frankston was supposed to boom, and it's always said Frankston's going to skyrocket, and it's so much potential. It really never did or never has. It was the biggest, but still, it would have, over the 7 years I had it would have gone up 5 to 7%.
Yeah.
It really did actually underperform a little bit, but that's, $15,000 per year I was able to leverage from putting down $7,000 of my own money.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that when if you're trying to build a larger number that you can earn and save, if you want to work 40 years, don't listen to me. Just buy Barefoot Investor and just do what it says, and you'll be fine, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get you out of that, in 10, 20 year time frame, which is not so easy. I want to get you out of there, with an increase in lifestyle, not a decrease in lifestyle.
We want to be on the boat at 40.
Yeah, and I'm not saying whether it's going to be a 120-foot boat or a 20-foot boat. But you want to be
a dinghy.
You want to be on a dinghy or better, right?
But you can have a day off to go and get out on that dinghy.
Exactly right, or 2 days off. So that's you can't just save your way to that sort of lifestyle in that time. So you've got to take some chances. So to do something that takes a bit of a risk. If you lose on it, so you've got time on your side, worse off, you're going to work 40 years anyway.
Yep.
You're gambling on taking 20 years off that, you'll be fine.
Yep.
So in those respects, I think real estate is better because you can leverage it. Leverage being you can borrow money, you could do what you did. You leveraged $200,000 piece of real estate out of $1,000 that you put down, right?
Yeah, I also lied on my pay slips as well. I bullshitted on them.
I'm not going to recommend anybody does that. So that's why I like real estate early.
Yeah.
In terms of once you've taken all the gambles and chances, you built up that nest egg, I think it's very important to protect it because now it has to last the rest of your life. So how old are you, Ruth?
34.
34. So let's say you've got a 20-year plan. Let's say we get you out of there at 54. And you're going to say, 49 or it's bust, right? So we get you out of there by 50, compromise. So you're retired at 50, so that's 16 years.
Well, that's actually not that far away, to be honest. 16 years doesn't sound like a lot.
No, so we have to build, you have to go on the fast track, exits, but then when you're retired at 50, you're living to 120, man. There's no issue these days.
Bloody oath.
You're going to want to be healthy living to that.
I want to be better looking than I am now when I'm 80.
Miracles, yes, miracles.
No, we're aging. We're cracking it. That's the biggest thing you want to invest in, cracking aging.
100%. It's.
Who's that bloke? There's a futurist.
Kurzweil.
Not Ray Kurzweil. Another guy. Kurzweil said that there's been a child born that'll live to 500 or whatever he said. Yeah. There's another guy that.
So the time that money has to last you is forever. And that's when I still like real estate because to me, real estate is one of the few asset classes that you and I can understand where the income goes up with inflation because you'll get rent and rent's going to increase roughly with inflation over time. In fact, on commercial properties, it's actually written into the lease.
Yep.
But even on residential properties, we know that rents go up over time.
Yep.
And because rents are going up, the underlying value of the real estate goes up as well, roughly in line, because there's formulas. Residential real estate gives you roughly a 4% return. So if it goes up 20%, then the value goes up 20%. So both the capital and the income is protected by inflation over the long term of your retirement.
Yeah.
And so that's why, even though I'm, this VC who invests in tech startups, that's only a small portion of my net worth.
Yep.
And I've got marijuana stocks and all these
That's
things.
the risk portion, like you said.
Risk portion, which I'm overweight on. I understand I'm overweight from what I would recommend other people.
Yep.
But the bulk of the rest of my money is all in the 100% owned piece of real estate. And I'm hoping that the rents I get are enough to sustain me so I never need to sell any of the real estate. Yeah,
cool. That's great. So you got your risk. What do you call the other part of your portfolio? You've got your risk and you've got your what?
I don't know, safe.
Safe, yeah.
Yeah, passive.
Passive, yeah.
Well, it depends on what stage. Again, before you're building up that large nest egg that will let you stop work, it's the risk part of the investing part of your portfolio. After you retire, it's the passive part of your portfolio. So we have a terminology change. Yeah,
cool. One question that I kind of want to ask, and I asked a very similar question. Like, obviously, you want to look at it from personal finance. You're kind of an expert in that, I guess, or like people can take what you say and really, take the advice and run with it. But also, before we wrap it up, I wanted to ask you another piece of advice that you could give to the listeners and stuff, and it's around entrepreneurship. Because so many people have great ideas, they see an industry, they've worked in it, they can change it, they can fix it, they can make it better, but a lot of people sit on their hands, they, for whatever reason, they procrastinate and they never actually jump off the deep end, I guess. But what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to become an entrepreneur?
You got to be prepared to take the risk. So the problem is the longer you wait, the more of a safety net you build up. And also your expenses tend to increase as you get older. You get kids and you become more risk averse. And that's certainly what I felt. So it became harder and harder and harder to get out. And I made a spur of the moment decision. I mean, my father and I hadn't discussed me joining the business. It was a one-man business. It didn't look like it could afford me to me. He insisted it could. And it was really just a decision over a very short talk like we're having now. And I left and joined it. But it was like when you approach a swimming pool and you know it's going to be cold, and the longer you think about it, less likely you are to go in. You've just got to dive in. Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah. No, well, that's great advice. So, Adrian, your future, the next 5, 10, 20 years, whatever it looks like, what do you want to be doing with your time? Where do you want to be going? What do you want to be, what's the next, 20 years look like for you?
I've kind of made the decision already a year or so ago that I was going to stop investing in tech startups. I've done, that 60 times. Mm-hmm. I wrote a blog post about what I call the half-life of an investor. I'd say investors are like uranium.
Yeah, I read that actually. Yeah.
So, and I'll have to eat my own dog food. And what that theory basically says is for every 6 months after my last investment, my use to the next investor, the next startup I talk to, halves.
Yeah, right.
See, a lot of these angel investors and advisors in the startup space, and you say, okay, what have you invested in and when? And it's got to be at least $50,000 invested, not a small 10 grand one.
Mm-hmm.
Please. So, mate, when was the last time you actually invested in a startup? And you find it was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago when they sold their own business, and they're giving you advice now. That's dated like smelly cheese, Mm-hmm. So I have to eat my own dog food and realise that it's probably been 6 months or 9 months since I've done my last startup investment. If I don't do one again in the next 6 months, then it's probably time to walk away from doing, half of this type of talk.
Yep.
And anyway, I want to do the next phase, which I've been putting off, which is now to write my personal finance book.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Great.
So it's been sitting in my head for 8 years. I wrote a personal finance blog under a assumed name in the late 2008s, which I won't name. It's just embarrassing.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it forced me to get my ideas down.
Yeah.
And now I just need to turn it all into book form.
Cool. That's great. Sounds like a great project. All right. So, Adrian, anyone that's listening that might be interested in what you do and want to learn more, or maybe just want to see, some of the things you've invested in or read some of your writings, where can they go? Anything you want to plug? Where can people find you?
I would say that anybody who knows me knows I'm addicted to Twitter. So the best place to go is to follow me at smalltimevc, because I am a small-time VC, at Twitter. And follow me and reach out to me. And I hold office hours, which is what you talked about before. Mm-hmm. When Paul Nath and I meet you for 30 minutes, we have a term, because we have a term for everything in this industry. Yep. So it's called office hours. Mm-hmm. So I often post up on my Twitter profile a Calendly link to open office hours. I'll meet with any founder. But again,
oh, really? Cool.
Again, I feel my worth is reducing quickly. So, Getting quick, yeah.
All right, no worries. Well, Adrian, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Bill.
And that's a wrap.